You're watching Business Live. In our first story tonight, Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Dr. Mark Esibe-Yeboah, is pushing for the Ghana Revenue Authority and the Finance Ministry to intervene over the implementation of the Communication Services Tax. This follows concerns that telcos enforcing the directive by the Communications Ministry may not be able to do so. Now, some tax experts have also questioned the directive for the upfront deduction of taxes from subscribers. Speaking to Joy Business in Washington, D.C., Dr. Mark Esibe-Yeboah said their intervention would help finally settle the issue.
The service tax, as you are well aware, has been 6% since 2008, and the telcos argue that they absorbed the 6%. I don't know how they did, because they were paying the taxes to government, but they said they absorbed it somewhat. Now, if you are absorbing the 6% and now it's gone to 9%, then effectively you are charging a 3%, isn't it? So I saw 9% deductions, and everybody has seen it when they recharge. And the argument is, why are you suddenly testing Ghanaians to tell them that there's a 9%? Maybe for transparency purposes, I would not blame them somewhat, but I think somebody sought to make government unpopular by putting these messages. I've heard the Minister for Communications. I've been on the road and in the air in the past few days. I've heard the Minister of Communications respond to the telcos, telling them that the manner in which the tax is being implemented should be stopped also. But since I've been in Washington here, I've recharged credit and same. So I think they are going full speed ahead. I would also want to hear from the Ghana Revenue Authority and also the Ministry of Finances. Strictly speaking, this is a revenue matter.
To come clear on the issue, because you sit in committee, they bring you lots of proposals.
We amended this. Was the Finance Committee through the Ghana Revenue Authority, the Ministry of Finance, through the Finance Committee, brought this to Parliament. Okay, so we worked on this one, and so I would want to hear the Ghana Revenue Authority and the Ministry of Finance on this matter. I think it's a revenue matter.
What has been the best practice in terms of the enforcement of these taxes? Because we've heard the minority and some other people say that these things should be coming from the Ghana Revenue Authority. When it comes to even resuming any taxes, you have to come to Parliament.
That's why I'm saying that the review, the increase of the rate from 6% to 9% was brought to Parliament by the Ministry of Finance together with the Ghana Revenue Authority. The Ghana Revenue Authority is the collecting agency. The Ministry of Finance is the policy implementer. They decided that we are increasing this from 6% to 9%. The Ghana Revenue Authority, working under the Ministry of Finance, is the collecting agency. And so I think there's no ambiguity as to who is in charge here. And so if we hear from the ministry and also the Revenue Authority, I think some more clarity will be brought to.
That was Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Dr. Mark Esibe-Yeboah, speaking there to my colleague George Afe in Washington, D.C., where, of course, the IMF World Bank meetings are underway. Well, the IMF is making a case for some expenditure cuts to help deal with recent revenue shortfalls facing the country. This follows reports that government is still struggling to meet its revenue target even for the third quarter of this year. Experts say the development could impact negatively on securing funding for some important projects and also has implications, for instance, the ballooning budget deficits. Now, speaking to Joy Business, Assistant Director at the Fiscal Department of the IMF, Catherine Patillo, said these cuts must target non-essential expenditure.
IMF Fiscal Monitor Report tracks the debt position of more than 190 countries around the world and what will be the end year position. Engaging Joy Business in Washington, D.C., the director at the Fiscal Department, Catherine Patillo, believes that government must watch its revenue if they really want to end the year on a good note.
Transparent financing, and those are going to be critical in order to reduce large financing needs and anchor the debt dynamics, have debt keep coming down. And why is it so critical to reduce debt? I think it's well known, this figure, that in Ghana, interest payments then exceed 40% of tax revenues. So every CD of tax revenue, then 40% of it goes to pay interest. And if you reduce debt, then you reduce that claim on tax revenue, and you have more ability to use your tax revenue for vital needed spending.
She also argues the government should show some commitment if it's really committed to ensuring that they keep fiscal deficit of not more than 5% of the total revenue.
So a balanced approach that is looking for some expenditure measures and some revenue measures, I think, is the what's needed. So, and in particular, the IMF team then has identified in very detailed discussions with the government feasible types of measures then of at least 1 percentage point per year from 2020 to 2024 that could help again anchor debt on a downward path.
She believes that is one of the surest ways the government can show its commitment to fiscal discipline and ensuring that it matches revenue with expenditure.
On the revenue side, then I would mention efforts to broaden the tax base and strengthen tax compliance and administration, and then there is some space also on the spending side then in looking at non-priority spending.
That should be cut back, right?
There are particular measures that are being identified, and I think it's about also making sure that spending is efficient and really achieves the objectives that you want, and also to make sure that it's all on budget. So that was the other point about making sure that the financing is transparent. So all spending then should be on the budget.
From the IMF headquarters building in Washington, D.C., this is George Yafe reporting for Joy Business.
Well, we promise you some more perspective to this, and guess who's here? Philip Namfori, who has been away for some time. Good to see you on this program.
Thank you.
Philip, so the conversation about debts, I see familiar words, for instance, expenditure cuts, still struggling to meet revenue targets. That's the story, even after we have left the IMF support program.
Okay, so let me start off from here. Developing countries such as ours and frontier economies such as ours, we face a very difficult task. We are trying to accelerate growth, but at the same time, in the acceleration of this growth, we must not burden future generations to come. You are very familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, and developing sustainably involves doing this without burdening future generations. But how can we do this? We collect revenue and we spend, but we have a pattern where we've been collecting less revenue and we've been spending more, leading to budget deficits over the course of every financial year, as far as I am concerned in terms of my age. Now, the debt levels have been increasing, but what the IMF is advocating for is taking on this debt, but doing so in a smart way so as not to burden us even now and burden us in the future. And there are a lot of ways we can do this. We've had several discussions on Business Live and all our shows, and generally as a country, on how we can increase our revenue and reduce our expenditure. And sometimes it seems very easy when we discuss it, but when you're putting it into practice, the government has so many competing needs, so many needs both from the recurrent expenditure side and the capital expenditure side, and must meet these needs, must also think of elections, let's be realistic here, and must also ensure that we get what we need in the coming years or the coming financial years. So yes, there was a debate in this IMF World Bank meetings, and it was hashtag debt for development. And at the core of this discussion came up the transparency of debt. Now, Bank of Ghana will normally publish figures on our debt. Ministry of Finance will also publish theirs, etc. Everybody will come together and put data together. More often than not, we have Bank of Ghana coming out with the figures. But in this discussion should be the issue of transparency. When we take the debt, let us use it for what it's required for. Let us track its use. You know, we always are familiar with taking the Eurobonds. they state the use of these Eurobonds, what the proceeds will be used for. But we don't normally follow through and see have indeed these debts been used for what they have stated for. And some of these things feed into the transparency issue. Because if we know what these debts are used for, if it's going to wasteful expenditures, if it's going to corruption, whatsoever, then we can track it and we can bring some accountability into the circle. But when you don't do that, then we go for large debts. Then it increases our servicing costs. So we take revenue and we're pumping a lot of it into wages and compensation. Then the rest goes into refinancing of our debt or paying the interest on our debt.
Right.
And the cycle goes on and on. So these are some of the things that we need to be cognizant of in these discussions we have.
So we had the Assistant Director at the Fiscal Department of the IMF, Catherine Patilu, talk about the fact that these expenditure cuts must target non-essential expenditure. So, for example, what is she talking about, and how feasible is this in ensuring that we don't hit the roof when it comes to debts?
Well, non-essential expenditure, I beg your pardon, will be better answered by those in power. If you look at our main expenditure items, wages and compensation, interest payments, statutory payments, capital expenditure, the first three I mentioned are very essential. These two are also recurrent, in the sense that when we pay, it's not going to finance any infrastructure projects. They are going to be used. So, and we have very little left for capital expenditure, which we go and borrow from. So, cutting non-essential expenditure, we'll have to go into the various MDAs, the various allocations, and see what is not needed there. And this will be best answered and done by those in power, because they know, they have access to the data, they have access to information. We can only juxtapose and give our own projections, but they actually know what is wasteful, what is not. Different debates come up as to number of people in government and all these things. So
we've got to move on from this, but I'll just ask you this quickly. I mean, we know this, we know what we have to do, and seeing that we are entering an election year, I mean, sometimes I just feel this is just talk to make us happy, and that we are not going to see real action taken.
Well, the election year cycle, like I mentioned in my first submission, is part of their priority spending. You must do certain things that you stated in your budget, and 2020 budget will spell it out. However, when you're doing that, don't confuse it with your election-related promises. Make sure that what you budgeted for is what you follow, do it properly, and all things being equal. But sometimes there are political pressures which we must factor into these discussions. So we must just make sure that what we put in place, this Fiscal Responsibility Act we put in place, we must follow through with it and ensure that we stick to what the numbers are.
Thank you very much indeed. Philip Namfori will be coming to you again at 9 p.m. with the PM Express Business Edition. He'll be talking about the communication services tax. You want to stay tuned in for that at 9 p.m. later in the day. But let's move on to other stories. More than 2 years after the launch of the flagship One District, One Factory program by government, there are also plans to support some districts without projects to benefit from. According to Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Carlos Ahenkra, districts in the country that may not have any of the projects will be supported with equity contribution and interest payment subsidy to leverage additional capital investments required by investors. This will be part of efforts to get every district to benefit from government's transformation agenda. The Deputy Minister was speaking at the inauguration of a new manufacturing factory for construction materials in Accra by French group Saint-Gobain Weber Ghana Limited.
Speaking at an event to commission a new local manufacturing company for the construction sector, Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry Carlos Ahenkra said the initiative of equity support to investors is aimed at driving investment to areas in the country where promoters could not identify a raw material to establish any factory. According to him, government will also be given some capital expenditure support through subsidies for the factories in the various districts.
112 ongoing 1D, 1F projects of business promoters in as many districts will be supported with capex or interest subsidy. Additionally, districts without 1D, 1F projects will also be supported with equity contribution and interest payment subsidy to leverage additional capital investment required through the participating financial institutions for investors and interested parties consideration. With respect to strategic anchor industries, the three key projects to be implemented in collaboration with the private sector investors are the Textiles Reform Program, the Ghana Automotive Development Program, and the Integrated Sugar Development Program.
The new factory is expected to produce construction materials aimed at helping industry players deal with the influx of substandard materials in the Ghanaian market. Here's Chief Executive of Saint-Gobain Sub-Saharan Africa, Jean-Claude Lassere.
To allow to get a better construction with innovative solution to preserve energy, to get better noise and acoustic in a house, and obviously better comfort for the people. In Africa, so we are producing many products to be tailor-made for the needs in Africa. And in Ghana, in particular, we are very proud to have now 2 plants in Accra to produce many different products, some admixtures, so some additives for the concrete, so to improve in reality the quality of the concrete and to get better construction for sky buildings, to make better internal surfaces for the walls, and now a brand new line to make tile fixing, to make grout, to make also waterproofing solution, to be capable to have internally and externally a better solution for the Ghanaian industry in the construction.
The inauguration of the local production line is part of the company's expansion drive to create more values for customers. Ebenezer Sabute's report for Joy Business.
Now, businesses are gradually losing their customers due to lack of awareness, control and expression of emotions on how to handle complaints. That's according to human resource professional and director of Paradise Home Care, Rita Krampa. She is worried many startups are folding up because of the lack of what she calls emotional intelligence in their business operations. She spoke to Love Business at a corporate meetup session organized by the Entrepreneurship Hub, No Business as Usual, at Asokore Mampong in the Ashanti region. Prince Apia has more.
The module known as emotional intelligence is critical to the ability of businesses to produce and provide customer-tailored products and services. Mrs. Rita Krampa observes the phenomenon is often overlooked by many businesses at the risk of collapse. She spoke at a corporate meetup session organized by Entrepreneurship Hub, No Business as Usual, at Asokore Mampong in Ashanti region.
So one of the things that has affected startups is their emotional responses to their customers' complaint. Now the customer is maybe angry or irritated because of something that is not right. They have expectation of either your product or service, and then didn't go right, so they come angry. Now if you are not emotionally intelligent, you also respond with anger. Because you didn't handle it well, you lose the customer. It goes to the next person who can provide that service. So as a startup, it is very, very important. People are just losing customers because of anger. I think that in as much as we are learning about entrepreneurship, we are learning about how to make our products and services better and everything, we also need to find time to read a little about emotional intelligence and how we can apply it to our day-to-day interaction with our customers.
The event was under the theme Emotional Intelligence at the Workplace for startups and other businesses. Founder of Mandate Books, Dr. Samuel Tinaje, emphasized the need for startups to employ this phenomenon in their businesses.
Now it's about people. We have gone beyond, I will do it and you will come. It's now about how do I do it so that I can attract you. So if I understand your emotions and I get to the point that you are necessarily moved by your emotions, then I'll be able to do things that can hit you at the right place and at the right moment so that my business can thrive. So basically for every entrepreneur who is interested in not just being ordinary, but being big, you need emotional intelligence.
No Business as Usual trains young people to prepare themselves either for employment or start their own businesses. Coordinator Esther Marty spoke to Love Business.
We realized that there is a need for them to be also emotionally intelligent because they are going to interact with people, network with people, and these people are the ones going to help them to achieve their deliverables or to be their customers. So if they are going to be employed, they'll be working with teammates, colleagues. How do they relate with them? How do they manage conflicts? So there was a need for us to organize this event to equip them with the necessary skill.
The corporate meetup session is one of the many programs organized by No Business as Usual. Prince Apia reporting.
While still staying in the Ashanti region, management and board of Odotobri Rural Banks have increased the bank's loan security by between 140 and 150%. This is higher than the International Financial Reporting Standards new guideline minimum benchmark of 120%. Despite a 20% increase in loan advancement, the bank's profit after tax declined by 16%. Chief Executive Siaka Baba Ahmed says the move has been necessitated by high non-performing loans and credit losses. He spoke to Lab Business during the 32nd annual general meeting of the bank, which also marks the 35th anniversary celebration of the bank. Prince Apia has more.
The 32nd annual general meeting of the Odotobri Rural Bank. Performance of the bank saw deposit mobilization increase by 21.65%, though profit reduced by 16% on the back of the banking crisis. Investment in treasury bills and other short-term securities recorded an increase of 17.08% during the period under review. Despite 20% increase in loan advancement, the bank's profit after tax declined by 16%. The bank has put in measures to strengthen its credit risk policies. Chief Executive Siaka Baba Ahmed spoke to Lab Business at the 32nd annual general meeting.
We make sure that now you have, with the introduction of the Loan Act, they are saying that before you give loans to anybody, you have to get security, which is about at least 120% of whatever money you are giving out. And we have even increased it, depending on the sector. If it's a risky sector, you go to 140, 150. So you always have to make sure that whatever money goes out, you have to get it. Because if you don't get it, it will go against your profit. And you know this time, the tenor is very, very tough. If you do that, you collapse your business.
Mr. Ahmed reveals the bank is deploying a mobile application to enhance customer service experience by end of the third quarter.
Before the year ends, we are coming with a mobile app that has been tried and tested. It's going to help our customers so much. Now we are moving to digital age. So people think that I can use my mobile phone to do a lot of things. So why should I go to bank to check my balance, for instance? To check whether my deposits in the account, for instance. If I want to move money from one account to another account, why should I go to the bank? So if we're able to do that, it will help everybody to ease the congestion at the banking hall.
The initiative is part of the 35th anniversary celebrations of the bank. Board Chairman Asamoah Boateng says the bank has approved payment of dividend of more than 600,000 Ghana cedis despite the challenges.
For a financial organization to be 35 years, it means it's well established. And they are no longer afraid if they are doing business with us. And somewhere along the line, we have to bring the interest rate down so that we can attract more people, and then to be a win-win situation. Their business will flourish, they will get profit, we also wouldn't be worse off.
Meanwhile, the bank has exceeded its share capital by more than 100%. Prince Apia reporting.
Now, the EU delegation in Ghana is giving the Fisheries Commission high marks for the fight against illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing practices. On Sunday, the Fisheries Commission imposed a fine of $1 million on a vessel that had on board small fishes during the May-June close season. According to the ambassador of the EU delegation to Ghana, Diana Akonsia, such robust and transparent enforcement action is welcomed and should deter other operators from engaging in destructive forms of fishing. Richard Kojinyako has more.
The fisheries resources in West Africa, the EU ambassador to Ghana says, are under increasing pressure, and there is growing evidence that illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing is a component of organized cross-border money laundering, tax avoidance and even financing for terrorist activity in West Africa. At a Deba organized in her honor by Farid Juma Nkodo and Farid Bambo, both EU-funded projects, the EU ambassador Diana Akonsia praised the Fisheries Commission and government, but intimated there was more work to be done if the country is to safeguard the ecological gains from this year's close season.
This year saw the first ever close season in Ghana for the artisanal and inshore fishing sector, and a closure for the industrial trout fleet over the peak spawning season for small pelagic, when fish lay their heads, contributing to rebuilding the fisheries. that the Fisheries Commission has imposed a minimum fine on $1 million on a vessel that had juvenile small pelagics on board during the May-June close season. Such robust and transparent enforcement action is to be welcomed and should deter other operators from engaging in destructive forms of IUU fishing that threaten to undermine the good intentions of management measures such as the close season. So I would like here to commend the Fisheries Commission and the Fisheries Enforcement Unit for this very good work. And we hope that it will be pursued and that enforcement of the fine will happen.
The EU, she avers, is ready to support the Ghanaian government and fishing communities in the fight to end the highly damaging practice of saiko and other forms of illegal fishing. The Omahin of Ogwa traditional area, who chaired the Deba, called on government to intensify efforts to tackle the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing practices. Today you enjoy from your illegality, but remember, tomorrow comes with a risk because there wouldn't be.
And that's Business Live tonight. Thanks for watching. Join us again in 2 hours. We'll tell you the story about the NIC clamping down on unlicensed insurance brokerage firms. That's it. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com. My name is Darryl Kwao. Thanks for watching.